I love that buzzer. Bit of a shock to the system. Well, hello and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on our live. Now we'll be talking about mapping GTM execution to the CEO's vision. So I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, founder of Scale Your Sales Framework and Scale Your Sales podcast. And I've had the wonderful Anpo on the podcast, and I really wanted to get her onto a platform again because she's got so much knowledge and insight. So I have designed this completely around the wonderful Anpo, who I'll introduce in a second. So we'll be talking about scaling to win. It's like the strategic blueprint for scalable revenue growth. And I remember when I spoke to Anne said that this is something that she's seen a lot of. Often you'll have CEOs often have a vision, whether they communicate it or not, but the plan comes from GTM. And I thought this was such a great subject. So Anne is founder and CEO of Ignite Consulting. As a fractional RevOps and CRO, she truly understands how to bridge the gap between strategic and the operational lens. So I look forward to your contributions, your questions, and any comments you have. Please do post them in your chat, and then we will see them and make sure we answer them. If you're seeing this on the recording as well, please make sure that you continue to post your comments and connect with myself and Anne, and we will certainly come back to you. So Anne, I wanted to start this off by just giving you the results of our poll at the beginning of November, knowing that we're going to be talking about this subject and it's the theme, our content theme. I posed the question, what's the number one barrier to scaling your revenue engine right now? And it was really close. 31% said outdated sales process. 29% said misaligned leadership priorities. 27% said data silos and lack of insights, which probably doesn't surprise you at all, Anne. And only 14% was customer churn and poor retention. So what's the biggest misalignment you're seeing between strategy and execution in the organizations that you work with, Anne?
Yeah. And also thanks so much, Janice, for having me again. I always love coming on here. It's interesting that sales process was one of those because I think it's just a factor of the go-to-market teams. So when we talk about, I see that because, so I'm a fractional CRO, fractional RevOps exec, but I did this when I was also in-house, and I've done this with probably 90% of my clients. I go in, there's some really big goal that has been set by the CEO. Maybe it's been set by the board. And really, I turn around and I say, okay, well, where's our roadmap and our plan of execution when I kind of get in there? And what I find is often maybe there is no roadmap, or there's like 5 or 10 roadmaps and none of them are connected. They all sit in different functional teams. And then I say, well, have you gotten together as a team and discussed this and prioritized one integrated roadmap? And usually the answer is no, we've never done that. How do we do that? And so that is a common gap that I see in organizations that I join. And it's something that, you might be hearing this like, really, that's it? It sounds so simple. Like, get in a room and figure this out. But so many teams are so focused on kind of like getting the work done that they don't actually pause for that very, very important step of joint integrated planning and alignment. And so that is one of the first things that I do in an organization. Like, we can get into this, but I'll do, just as I'm onboarding into an organization, I have my go-to-market diagnostic. I've done it in many orgs. I adapt it to the nuances of your business. But the key output of that is I am listening to the teams. I'm reviewing lots of documents. I'm meeting individually. And then I'm putting that all together to say, here is what I've learned in terms of what must be done. No surprise, there's always far too many things that must be done than you can do. And then I personally organize every single leader of the go-to-market. The leader, it needs to be the core leader, head of sales, head of marketing, head of customer success, RevOps, Maybe there's even products sometimes in there for more product-led growth companies. And we say, now we're going to sit down and I'm going to present what this integrated view looks like. And we're going to collaborate and we're going to vote. And we're going to get out of this one document that we all align and execute to and we shake hands on. And what's important about this is instead of me saying, here is your go-to-market execution plan, I make them defend their plan. I make them debate and challenge each other. And that when we talk around, okay, why is there misalignment? Because a document like that generally does not exist. It's never existed in any org that I've been a part of, which is kind of mind-blowing because I work with orgs as small as $1 million to orgs that are $60 million. And they don't have that in one place.
And it is mind-blowing because otherwise, why are we there as an organization? But it's also understandable because people come from different environments and we continue to use what we know and what we feel comfortable with. So everyone's bringing their own strategy, their own idea of what go-to-market is because it's what they've done before. And I think it takes a really strong leadership or a fractional leader coming in like yourself that recognizes that it is also misaligned and then having to shake hands, sit down and agree that we're working to one execution plan is hard. And I think it's probably even harder when organizations are trying to do it themselves.
Oh yeah. And I want to talk about that for a moment because I've thought, why has this existed? And what's fascinating is when I go and I meet individuals and I say, hey, what would be really helpful for you? What they say is an integrated roadmap. And I'm like, okay, well, why haven't you helped drive this integrated roadmap? But it's because it's not like they're sitting on their hands. They're busy like doing the work, leading their org. And what I find is perhaps there's a political nature to it. Is it my place to be the one to convene and to align all of these different teams? And you might say, oh, that's the job of the CRO or that's the job of the CCO. They're also quite busy. And what I find is they usually think their teams are more aligned in their planning and execution than they give them credit for, right? And so, or they give them maybe too much credit. And so I've actually had leaders go, oh, thank God you're here. Now you can hold us all accountable as a third party. I'm going to defend my agenda as hard as possible. And I realize I probably am not going to get everything I want, but I want to be able to defend. I want so-and-so to defend their agenda. And we need somebody here who's like a neutral arbiter to really manage across. And also the other, I think, role that I play, or maybe heads of RevOps or go-to-market operations or integrated go-to-market, is it's not just, being the judge. And actually you're not the judge. You're really like creating the forum for people to debate and help them align. But ideally, you're also painting the picture of where there are key dependencies. We're really thinking through this impacts this, and that often is not clear until you see it all in one place. And even if you see it in one place, sometimes it's still not clear because has that team worked across functions to really understand those leverage points that exist in the go-to-market? Oftentimes not.
Yeah. I often see myself as the facilitator, the host hosting the meeting and the facilitator. And you're facilitating a lot of those sometimes very challenging conversations because everybody is trying to secure their own positions. It often comes down to that. And they want to make sure that they end up in the hierarchy and not pushed down. And so, it's very much a facilitation process. And so I completely understand why it takes a third party coming in that's completely independent, that has no political agenda to come in and do that. And it's absolutely critical if organizations want to push forward to actually have the same language that they use, as simple as that, the same level of understanding, a clear idea of, we know the vision, but what does that mean to you? How do you interpret it? How would you deliver it? And that for other people to listen to that, so they begin to understand other people's point of view. So it is very much a facilitation process. And, I've got some data that backs this up, in that 78% of CEOs cite execution misalignment as their top barrier for growth. And,
Yes.
we can see why that happens. Everyone's working at cross purposes, and particularly in go-to-market teams that are completely off track. So I'd like to delve in deeper into and how you shift the solution to mapping the execution to the CEO's vision, to the vision. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So usually what I do is, I've done this roadshow, I've gathered all of my elements. I mean, I've worked in enough orgs. I know what like a scaled go-to-market factory or engine looks like, if you will. And there's usually a few parameters. I mean, yeah, there's a sales process, there's a post-sale process, there's the integration of the marketing to sales funnel. Do you have a strong operating cadence, forecasting, all these things? Do you have a strong go-to-market planning underneath your belt? Do you have aligned targets? I mean, there's all of these components that go into go-to-market execution, right? That sit in lots of different chunks. Usually what I'll do then is I'll line up what all these items are. I'll really do basically a gap analysis. And then I'll layer in what are the top company priorities? What are the top CEO priorities? How do these either map to or not map to these priorities? And that is a filter by which we make sure we get alignment to the top company objectives. Some people have this as, V2 MOM, like a Salesforce generated structure for how they align their initiatives, their OKRs, their MBOs. All of those can integrate into this document, as you will. The other thing I do is whoever is the key executive, the CEO, the CRO, you need to make sure that they layer in what they think is most critical, right? Because ultimately, I like to have here is bottoms up what your go-to-market leaders think are the top initiatives that we have to do. And then we map them to what is possible to do based on the capacity that we have. I'm a big believer in, you're going to do this go-to-market execution roadmap. That should inform what the OKRs are, your MBOs, and what you are gold on as executives, right? That way it doesn't just go off into the ether and not turn into anything. It's not just a document. It's really what we live, eat, and breathe as go-to-market. But then we map it into when are we going to execute this? We vote across how we're going to tackle it as an aligned go-to-market. But at some point, usually what happens is there's too many things that we're going to do, or things are competing. And that's where I bring in the highest ranked executive that needs to sign off on them, and they make the decision. And I think this is key. And clear example, recently I did this with a client, and I had the VP of marketing say, one of the most important things that I want done is a go-to-market tech stack audit. Now, I could do those things all day long. I've done many of them. I also think they're very important. But when we were looking at the ranked stack priorities and we were considering what was going to happen from a leader entry perspective, we were getting a new leader. I went to the highest ranking executive of that organization, the CRO, and I said, here is what your team thinks that we need to do stack ranked. What do you think is most important? Because this can't all fit in the bucket. And she said, that go-to-market tech stack audit, we're waiting. That's going to happen later. And this is important because ultimately you have to know who has the ultimate decision rights. That person makes it, and then we disagree and commit. And we commit, and that is the plan. And that is what we hold to. And you don't go off plan. You don't go rogue. And that's the whole point. We talked about why are CEOs, you said that's 78%, which is a fascinating stat, and I agree with it. Why is go-to-market execution or go-to-market misalignment around execution so important? Because we all know about this concept of the go-to-market flywheel. I have been part of orgs where they were misaligned, they were missing targets, and suddenly we got this wheel, this engine flying, turning, working together, and then our performance went like this. It's because everything was working together. You got that amplifying compounding effect. And that is what happens when you get orgs aligned.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's interesting. It's important to get buy-in from that key decision maker. Otherwise, as soon as you're out the door, then so is the plan. And everyone's signed to, and they don't realize how that affects the culture of the organization. But if they're not brought into the key priorities, it's not going to happen.
Oh, and I have to share one more story. I remember, gosh, years ago, I was in-house in an org, and of course I'd done this. And I sat down with the go-to-market leadership team, which the CEO was part of that go-to-market leadership team. And I said, hey, we're 6 months in, we're doing our next round of go-to-market execution planning. We did it every 6 months. We would revise quarterly, but we did a deep dive every 6 months. And I made the CEO give me her input. And I remember she said, why am I doing this? I'm like, because you need to know what your team of leaders is signing up to, and you need to be comfortable with it and bless it or disagree so that we can adjust now, because this has a knock-on effect, right? I mean, another org I worked in, when we kind of rolled out what this go-to-market execution roadmap was at a big on-site, it really aligned with them doing much lower level OKR planning. And they said, wow, this is so helpful. We have not had what the leaders want. We've been going bottoms up, not knowing if these were the right things. And, you can't have like the tail wagging the dog, right? Your job as a leader is to provide your teams with that guidance and that strategy. And I think this time where we're just doing a lot, we're doing a lot more with less. It's so critical to provide that guidance. And this mechanism has flow down all the way through your organization.
Yeah. Often my starting point for any organizational transformation, and that's what this is, there is the customer journey. That I'm, customer-centric sales, the customer journey. And I often ask leaders, why are you making that decision if you don't know the impact on your top customers? So customers has always been the core of what I do and how I transfer organizations. So how does this come into the revitalization and realignment of the go-to-market strategy?
I want to take this question and I want to look at it maybe with a slightly different lens, because you were speaking about something, Janice, and it made me think. Whenever I, deliver, hey, here are all the things we could do, 60-line go-to-market execution. We're not going to do 60 things. And we whittle it down to 10 or 15, and then we like crystallize it. We cement it in stone. We say, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing for the next quarter, 2 quarters. We'll revisit, we'll adjust. It's not just the initiatives. The other thing that I think is really, really important is what metric are each of these initiatives expected to drive and impact? And that puts it in the mind of like how your executive team is going to think about it, how your board is going to think about it. So for example, you might say, I'll pull one. We need to develop a pipeline generation muscle in our organization. If you just shared that, you said, we need to generate a pipeline generation muscle in our organization. Okay, cool. People know what pipeline generation means. So what? What is the metric of impact that we're going to measure success by? Well, there are a few metrics. One, obviously, like, how much pipeline are you going to be generated? You set that, it's going to impact it, but you also need to set a target, right? Maybe you're actually not just looking at pipeline generation engine. Maybe you want to look at the velocity with which that pipeline is entering. So these are things you also need to think about. What are the 1 or 2 or 3? I never usually have more than 3 metrics of measure that you are going to attach to each of these initiatives to define what success looks like. And that's really, really important. So I literally have a 2-page slide by the end of this, and I say, here are the initiatives. This is what we're going to do. Here's the owner. This is the quarter they're going to happen in. This is the metric. This is the target. And this is what we're going to track. And then that allows you to see, like, did we get it right? And sometimes, FY, you're not going to know what the metric is. You might have to take a big old guess. But you know what? It's I was listening to a webinar that Kyle Lacey, who's the CMO of Docebo. I'm never saying it right. Anyways, he was at Jellyfish. Now he's at Docebo, one of the two. And he was talking about implementing a pipeline to bookings model. People are like, well, what if we don't have the data? How do we know what to set? And he's like, you know how you know? You set it, you take a stab at it, you learn based on how far you were off that, and then you use that information to set it again. But the point is, you have to start measuring, so you're not just executing things on a roadmap that are meaningless. And I find that the more senior leaders get this, more junior leaders will think at a very task-oriented level, versus more senior leaders of an organization will think at an initiative level that might have multiple metrics of measure.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting comment. It's only by setting it do you know it's the right metric, and it's understanding the impact of what you're setting while you're on that journey, and what is the knock-on effect. I think that's quite a difficult concept for many leaders to work with, because it's a bit like, well, let's just draw a line and see where the line is.
Mhm. But you'll get a
Yeah.
lot better at it. I mean, I remember one of the first times it was this project I did, gosh, probably 7 years ago, and it was the top initiative for the company. We had been really, really down on our pipeline, which had been flowing through into our bookings. And it was just so I launched a project. I called it Project Influx. I name all of my projects. And so this was Project Influx, like release an influx of pipe. And we were launching account-based marketing at the time for the first time. We had never done it. We had no idea. So we knew that what account-based marketing was going to be doing, but we wanted to set targets for outbound-based pipeline as well to complement. And so we just said, okay, here's what we think we're going to get. We don't know. We wildly missed it the first quarter, but then we got much closer. We got much tighter. We set better targets, and we actually changed the slope of our pipeline generation. One, because suddenly we were all aligned. This was a core priority. We had metrics that we were measuring. We were looking at them every single week at the executive team, and we were looking at the team level. So they were really understanding, okay, what worked, what didn't, so that we could set better metrics the next time. I think the whole point is you have to measure it, and you will get better the more that you measure it, the more attention that you give that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I've got a Forrester stat for us. Companies that map GTM activities to strategic goals grow by 30% faster with 20% less churn. Brilliant, isn't it? Brilliant stat.
I believe it. I believe it. I mean, I know I have all these examples. There's another company I remember where we used to do, a lot of companies do internal QBRs. I used to run the go-to-market QBR for sales, marketing, customer success, and we would set, we would get together as a leadership team. We would independently come up with our plans. Similar, we wanted that independent, so everybody had a bottoms up. Then we would come together, we would blend them, say, here's what we're doing for the quarter. We would set our metrics that informed our OKRs. That ended up transpiring into a full all company QBR that I also ran, which was fun. It was like a really exciting thing to do every quarter, all the different leaders. But we introduced something which was a framework to what are all the initiatives each function is going to do. So we had one from finance, from HR, from product, from marketing. And then within that, I forget what they called it. Harvey Ball, I want to say it was called. There were our all company OKRs, and there were only like 4 that were all company all year that we needed to really prioritize. And next year initiative, you had to put whether it was aligned to that or not at all. And we use that as a prioritization mechanism for what we would do across the entire company. And it was very elucidating to see some organizations, they would put together their plan. They're like, crap, none of these impact the company OKR. And that was a real wake-up call. Sometimes maybe you have to do something because you've been putting it off. But if all of them, that's usually a moment where they're going to pause and they're going to re-look at these initiatives that they're prioritizing for the groups that they manage.
Yeah. And we wonder why we're missing targets all the time. It's because it's not aligned. I mean, certainly at Scale Your Sales, what we're seeing is that top performing organizations don't just cascade goals. They go about co-creating the customer journey with alignment in mind. So aligning the customer journey to the overall operational and strategic goals. So that's the kind of focus we've taken with organizations. But I just wanted to kind of direct people to my newsletter, and in the newsletter I covered some of this because I want to make sure that people have tools that then that they can take away and extra information to read, because we're always limited with time. So the Scale blueprint is built on 5 pillars. And the first is strategic vision and planning. Second is collaborative leadership and alignment. Third is actionable roadmaps and accountability. Third is lean operation and scalability. And third, I've got my numbers, that's fourth. Fifth is engagement, enablement, and culture. There's a link, I've put the link in here. If the audience kind of goes to the link, they'll be able to read so much more about the detail around that, and hopefully use this as a structure to better align their GTM. And it certainly creates, revenue alignments, and, we have revenue alignment councils within organizations, implementing quarterly a vision to GTM sprints is
Yes.
another way that you can do that. And but also use of AI insights to forecast alignment breakdowns. I love this one as well, alignment breakdowns before they happen. So looking for where the gaps are. And you mentioned just recently about, really going in and looking for the gaps. So really important. So what one other scalable system or habit would you advise CEOs, CROs who want to stay aligned with the CEO's growth vision?
Yeah, I mean, I know I keep coming back to the metrics and the data. We've talked around the initiatives, getting really aligned around the plan, but then it's also around what metric are we going to measure, and having that same metric, I think, is really, really key. So, for example, let's take marketing to sales, right? How many times have you been in an organization where maybe marketing says, I'm going to be held to marketing influenced pipeline, and sales like, I'm being held to S1 pipeline? You have different metrics. How are you ever going to align when they have different metrics with which they are measuring their own unique success? You need one metric. I think that's really key. It doesn't mean that you don't have other metrics that you look at, but what is the one thing that you're going to hold them jointly accountable to? That might be one. Perhaps you're having an experience where you're having really, really poor onboarding. And we've probably seen this. Well, sales oversold the deal. They should never have sold this deal, right? And then it gets thrown over the fence, and your customer success team has to onboard this customer, and it's a total failure, right? So what is the metric you can use to maybe incent both sales and your customer success team to have a very strong on? And that kind of ties back with earlier around sales process. The other thing I'm asked to do all the time. Not that people don't have sales processes. They have something. Usually it's really old, or it's very disjointed, or it's created by somebody who left the company 5 years ago. Nobody understands it, right? But ideally, what is happening on the post-sale side of the business? What is critical information that needs to be captured in order to set up for a really strong customer onboarding? Because remember, you get one shot. If you don't get that customer into your product and having success within the first 30 days of getting access to your platform or your tool, if you're in SaaS, you're behind the curve, right? So you need to be capturing that information, not when the deal closes and the ink is dry. You need to be capturing and make it the responsibility of sales who gets paid on that deal. So those are other examples from like a process perspective for how you can kind of unite the teams in terms of how they operate.
Brilliant, brilliant. Wow, what a wonderful, fantastic conversation, Anne. And certainly if you're a CEO, CRO, sales leader watching, you've got to ask yourself, is your GTM plan reinforcing or reinventing the vision? And if not, then certainly speak to myself and Anne. And just before we go, I just wanted to make people aware that the next live session is on the 19th of June. I'll be talking about taking the guesswork out of building and securing your best sales hire and building your sales team. So I would love to say thank you so much, Anne, for your insight and conversation. I've really enjoyed, as always, listening to your wisdom. Alignment isn't a quarterly event, and you've mentioned this. It really is a system, and you do need a third party like myself and Anne to actually come in and facilitate those essential changes. We've given you the stats and the reasons why you absolutely must do this. There's the link here for a tool, where a starting point in terms of scaling to win and using a blueprint and method in order to start the conversation within your organization. If it's not aligned, then it isn't going to grow. It isn't going to scale. So thank you so much, Anne Poe, for being my guest, and thank you for all your insight.
Thank you so much, Janice. Hope you have a great day, and awesome that you're having Lori on next week. We'll have to tune in for that one.